Hey guys, thanks for coming back. I'm Aaron with A-Lee Knives, and we're going to do part 3 of my My Dagger build tonight. In the last video, I finished the blade, and I asked you guys what I should use for some handle material, and I had tons of really incredible comments that gave me some insight, and I've come up with a good combination. I'm going to show you what we're going to do, and then we're going to get started. Alright, so in the video, I'm going to take a pile of materials in that dagger blade and I'm going to make this right here. This super nice, elegant dagger, nice and slim, sleek. You know, it's a cool thing, guys. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of tips throughout the video how you can make this and how you can make the different parts of this and how to make it a little easier for yourself. I think I counted 7 really pretty decent tips in this video alone. I'm not going to tell you where they're at because I'd like you to watch the video. But as always, if there's something that you don't see in the video that you have a question about, definitely feel free to subscribe to my channel and then ask me a question down below in the comment section. I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that you guys have about knife making. Let's go ahead and get this dagger made. Alright, there's our blade. That's what we're going to start with. Now that I've got my blade finished, I'm going to keep it on a nice mat so that I don't introduce any scratches. We're going to use nickel silver for the guard that'll match this shiny top layer. Then we're going to use vulcanized paper for a black liner in between the guard and this linen paper micarta that's white. Then we're going to put another layer of black on this side, and then here it goes. This is stabilized quilted koa wood from the high elevations of Hawaii. Incredible wood. This is a luthier wood, mostly used in musical instruments. It's absolutely gorgeous. I absolutely love this wood, guys. I stabilize this stuff myself. I stabilize a lot of my own woods. I haven't shown you guys my processes on stabilizing yet, but I will. This has the external resin still on it, so you can't really see the figure yet. Oh, wait till you see this. This has really thick ribbons of quilt in it. This isn't just curly, this is quilted. This is an awesome piece of wood. First thing we're going to do, first order of business, we're going to mill this slot and get this fitted up. Then we'll go ahead and cut all of our materials and get the handle stack ready, do the glue up and move on. I went ahead and clamped the knife long ways, so I'm putting pressure on the entire blade instead of clamping just down on the tang, because remember in the last video I showed you how when I clamped down extremely hard on the tang here, it squished a little bit because of the copper layer. I don't think it would do that up here because this portion of the blade is hardened, but I'll tell you what, I don't want to go and find out. Anyhow, we're on the portion of the build where I'm going to fit the guard. On this guard, what I did was I milled a larger slot that the tang fits into freely. But then at the top, I milled this top last 10,000ths of an inch. Actually, it's more like 20,000ths of an inch in here. Slightly smaller than the tang, so see how it won't fit on? It won't go on there right now because there's not enough material removed. On this side, there is, and you can push it 90% of the way through the guard right there. And then the last 10% of the guard in there, I've got a step. Can you see my step? Oh, you can. Look at that. You can see the step in there, right? There. That's the step. Now, I do that for a reason. It makes it a lot easier to do guard fitment when I do it that way. So I milled this slot larger than the tang, slightly, and I milled the last 10% smaller than the tang. Now what I'll do when I go to fit this, I'll take my file, which is right here, and I'll slowly just remove a tiny bit of material in here until I can fit it over the tang of the knife. And as soon as I get it to the point where I can fit it on the knife, I can hammer it on and I can really mitigate any gaps that might show up in here, because what it's going to do is it's going to take that last 10% of material that's prouder than the rest of the material, and it's going to squish it out of the way and conform perfectly to my knife here. So just kind of show you that process. Alright, that's far enough. Now we'll take this. Okay, so I could see where I need to remove a little bit more material to get that guard to fit up right. So now what I'll do is I'll change the angle here. Now I can lay this leather here. Everything's protected, and I can slightly tap on this tang to get it out of that guard. Alright. And what I'm left with here is you can now see the inside corners here, 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 and here. And I'll take my file and I'll take that corner out and put about a 30-degree bevel this way across this surface here to allow the corners of the knife to set up against this guard flushly. Alright, so after a bit of filing and fitting, let me get this figured in here. Alright, there we go. You can see that side, this is how large the opening is. And on this side, see how I radiused the opening to give me a slight angle coming down to clear the corners of the knife. Whoops. So basically what that does is it gives me a little bit of wiggle room out here for these inside corners to fit inside of that guard. So now I've taken this to 220. Here's a strip of 500 on your surface plate. It's always important to make sure that there's no debris on the plate before you apply your sandpaper, or else if you've got like a piece of grit on your surface plate, it's going to put a piece underneath your sandpaper and it's going to cause a gouge. So we just take this back and forth. I take it back and forth at first just to get the whole thing sanded to 500, and then I clean the paper, and then I'll sand it in one direction only to get rid of all the little fish hooks that form from sanding back and forth. Alright, that's good. So here's what I do. I just take the paper and smack it on the edge of the table a couple times. That gets all the stuff out of the paper. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to slowly drag it across in one direction. And this is the top of the guard that I'm finishing. Once you install it on the knife, you can never go back. So this is the time to get it perfect right now. And that's good. Let's go ahead and hammer it on the knife. I like this satin finish. I'm not going to polish it. I'm going to leave it satin just like that with a 500 grit finish on it. I like that. That looks good. It's going to look really good against this. So after hammering this on, I'm super happy with that fitment. It looks good. Can you guys see up there? I mean, that's good. Even for a satin finish, that's really good. I'm super happy with that. Cool. Let's move on to getting the rest of the pieces of the handle set up. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and cut a piece of this handle material here. This is just some white G10, or some white paper linen micarta actually. So we'll cut a slice of that off. We're also going to use white penstock. Yeah. We're going to make some of this right here. Just somewhere here in the middle, we'll cut that. I love this stuff. Alright, so there's those. Oh, no, I can't cut that with that, but it was a good try, right? This is going to the bandsaw. I'm not going to film that, I'm just going to go cut it off real quick. So this spacer material here, I treat exactly the same as the guard material. I'm going to take a measurement on the tang. I'll mark a center line, I'll put that measurement here, I'll mill out a slot so it can fit on there. I'm not going to film that either because it's exactly like I did for this. So I'm going to go ahead and get this done. And for these guys, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to mill a slot. Even though this paper's thin, I found that if you try to, it's really hard to cut with the razor blade, but I can run a sharp end mill right through it and it cuts a slot super great and it doesn't raise an edge. So I found milling a slot in these is the easiest way to do it. This is vulcanized paper liner material. Alright, I've got the camera set up straight and level. This looks off because I have the drill bit running at the angle of the tang so that as to not remove any material that doesn't need to be removed from this block. So I'm going to follow, I don't know if you could see, but there's a line right here that is part of the tang, and then the other line's right here. So I'll drill a hole in from this angle, and then I'll move the block this direction, and I'll drill a hole in from that angle, and then I'll connect the holes in the middle. I've had a lot of people have concerns about how to locate this hole on a hidden tang knife. When you hollow out your handle material and you've got this hole in your tang, you know, a lot of people ask, well, how do you accurately locate that hole in your handle? And actually, it's very simple, guys. What you do is you put all your pieces together, you know, the way that they're going to go on, make sure that they're all on there straight, and then you just lay it on your handle material, and you take a pencil and you circle out where your tang hole is on there. Make sure you've got everything lined up perfect, and then you mark out where your tang hole is. Now here's what makes it so simple. On hidden tang knives, I core this hole out, and the plan is to fill this with epoxy, put this all together, and let it dry. So technically, the epoxy fills up any unwanted voids that might happen when you do this. You know, I drill with a round drill bit, so the sides of the hole are round, and this is flat. So there's going to be a little bit of area on both sides of the tang pocket that are going to be filled with epoxy. That's kind of like bedding the tang at the same time that you're doing your glue up. Okay, so because of that, I drill this hole larger than the pin stock that I'm going to use. I'm going to use this pin right here, and I want you to see how much larger that hole is. I'm actually going to show you, there you go, you can see how much room there is in that hole? That offers you a little bit of wiggle room. So you lay your tang out, you have all your, it's absolutely crucial, you have all these pieces on here when you lay that hole out. If you are planning on putting these pieces on there and you put this piece of block of wood up here without those pieces and mark your hole, obviously your hole is going to be way too far down. So make sure all of your components are on there, and then lay it on the outside, mark out the tang hole, walk over, drill it out, and then when you fill this with epoxy and you squish it all together, you can take this pin and stick it right through there. And because that hole in the tang is slightly larger, it gives you just a little bit of wiggle room. So when you do glue up, if the tang shifts this way or this way or this way or this way, this will still fit through. Now, before glue up, I think it is a definite plus to go ahead and put all your pieces, drill your hole, put it together, and make sure that your pen does fit through before you fill this with epoxy. I've had it happen where I drilled the hole, I got everything ready, I epoxied it up, and boom, my pen wouldn't line up. I've done it, it has happened, even drilling a larger hole. So just make sure you get everything right. Generally, I find when your pen doesn't line up, what's happened is the top of this is not square to your material, and you measured it out this way, and when you went to do glue up, you put it on this way, and that would shift the location of your tang hole just slightly enough to where your pen might not fit. So if you did measure everything up and you get this fitment and you dry fit it and it works, but then you go to glue up and your pen won't go in, chances are you've rotated your handle material and it wasn't perfectly 90 degrees the way that you measured it. So those are some really good tips for you. I'm going to go ahead and drill this hole, and then we're going to go through the glue up process. So have you guys ever paid attention to how I do my glue up on these hidden tang knives? Because this is by far and away the easiest way to glue up hidden tang knives. When I first got started in knife making, I watched lots and lots of people create all these elaborate jigs to compress knives to get handles on a hidden tang. And this is a method that I devised that I think just makes sense. And it's super easy. You don't have to make a jig. I know you already have a vise, so you could just use that to do your entire glue up. Let me tell you how I do this. I take my blade and I wrap a piece of leather. Alright, so I take my blade and I take a piece of leather and I wrap it around. I leave this much space here. I leave a good amount of space right here so that if I have any squeeze out when the handle's put on, it comes out here and you'll be able to clean it off. That's a biggie. You need to make sure that you don't install this in the vise all the way up here so that you don't have room to clean out your squeeze out. So you're going to want to give yourself about that much room, and then you're going to install this in your vise. I'll show you exactly what to do here. Just tight enough to where when you put a clamp on this, it won't push the knife forward in the vise. Then you put all your handle materials on there with all your glue, all the different spacer materials, your handle, your entire handle stack, and then all you have to do is clamp from this side of the vise on the bottom of the handle, and it pulls all the handle material, the entire stack, all your spacers and everything, all the way up tight to the guard, and it even pushes the guard forward up against the blade. So you just put this on there, you crank it down nice and tight. The other thing is you could see down the top of your on the top of your clamp, it's a nice long straight angle, so you can line it up and make sure that your handle material is square and your guard is square and everything is glued up in a straight line. This is super simple. Don't make it harder than it has to be, guys. I know you have a vise. It doesn't have to be a vise, a giant vise like this. I was doing this on a cheap little Harbor Freight vise before I did this. As long as it's bolted down and it's not going to fall over, perfect. One other tip, I always put a piece of foil right here as a drip tray, because when you squeeze all this together, it's going to drip. So I always just put a piece of foil here. That's also where I mix my epoxy on top of that foil. It's a sacrificial piece of foil. I mix my epoxy, I put it all together, squeeze it on there, clamp it up. I just let it drip freely, let it dry overnight. The next day I come out and this thing's ready to rock and roll. Drip tray. And there it is. That's what it looks like, all glued up. I spared you the whole glue up process, because if you want to see that, you could see 20 other videos where I've done the glue up. But it's all, the whole stack is in there, all my spacers, my white spacer material, my liners, my white pen, the handle material. I got it all clamped together. So basically, by putting the clamp on the other end of the vise here, it's pulling all that material forward into the blade. Now, since this is a handle material how-to, we're working with curly koa from Hawaii in this video. And probably one of the most important things about koa that I've learned in my past, I'm definitely, hopefully, not going to learn it in this video, is that koa likes to blow out. Meaning that when you go drilling on it, when the drill bit passes through the backside of the wood, it likes to blow out chunks of wood. And if your handle material is thin and you don't have a lot of room for error, then what you're definitely going to want to do is you're going to want to put a block of wood underneath it so that when the drill bit passes through, it prevents the wood from spalling or blowing out the backside of the hole. I have learned that with koa before. It's a real fibrous wood. It's an island wood. So definitely take caution when you're drilling your pinhole and your handle material. I've got several more tips when it comes to koa. I've used koa extensively when I first got into knife making and throughout my knife making experiences, and I love curly koa. But I'll tell you what, in order to get it to finish and be beautiful, it's pretty finicky. So there's a lot of different tips that I'm going to give you in the end of this video on how you can finish curly koa and really get the most out of that figure and make it pop. Here it is, right after glue up. It's a big old chunky mess, but everything's in there. It's nice and tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the bandsaw. I'm going to nip these two pins off real quick. And then I'm going to take it to a 36 grit belt and just kind of even up the sides so that we can put some layout lines on this guy. And my plan is, since this is a wide blade, I'm going to go with a real wide profile handle and have a real thin handle. So that's the plan. We're going to go and put the plan into motion. So I want you to take quick note of all the different layout lines that I like to use. I put a center line right down the center. I put outside lines that match up with the outside of the blade that go the full length of the knife handle. And actually that's where I've ground to right here. This is my outside line right here on both sides. And then I drew a 90-degree line down here where the pommel is, and my intersecting lines so that I know that I've got each side equal. And then now I'm going to grind the radiuses in on the sides. So I start by putting in some grind to lines on the sides and on the face of the knife. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut off this little piece of material right here on all four sides. And that's going to start the rounding process of my handle. I'm not going to shape anything on this pommel yet. Here we go. Alright, this is as far as I'm going to take it on the machine. I want to zoom in and show you kind of the angles that I cut on the machine. You can see I knocked off all of the... I got the rough profile completely ground in all the way around, pretty much dialed into where I want it to. I used an 80 grit belt, and after I got the outside profile, you know, the roundness of the guard, the roundness of my tips, everything was cut in where I wanted it. I took it and I just broke the edges. See, I just broke all these edges to make the sanding process a little bit easier on me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in my sanding jig and I'm going to put a couple layout lines on here so that I can square this guard up and make it absolutely perfect with my files. I'll get the guard sanded in and sanded out first with the hard block to sand this metal. And when I get that dialed in, I'll go ahead and push over into this synthetic material and then into the wood, and I'll get this whole thing sanded out. And this curly koa is just going to explode with figure as I start to finish it out. Right now it's only got an 80 grit on it, so you can't even see the figure yet, but wait till you see that. It's going to be gorgeous. So the first thing I do is I get my sanding block here after I've shaped these lugs, and I'm going to clean my lugs up and get them completely sanded out. The bottom side of my lugs, all these corner radiuses, get them all to where I want them to be. Curly koa grows in Hawaii, and it can develop a very deep curly figure within the wood that's gorgeous. Now this curl is so deep right now that it just looks like discoloration until I put the oil on, and you're going to see the movement in the wood. It's really cool. But I wanted to show you a couple things. Let me zoom in here as close as I can get. There we go. Koa has all these deep pores in the wood. That's just something that you're going to play with when you're using koa wood. These deep pores, when you want to get a glass smooth finish, can be difficult. If you do an oil buildup, like a tung oil buildup, it takes a good 10 to 15 coats to fill those pores. I know, I've done this many times. Now, I have learned another way you could do this is to do a pore fill with an epoxy. So you mix a 2-part 24-hour epoxy, and you take a credit card and you just skim all those pores with that epoxy. But then you have to sand all of the top epoxy off, and it's kind of difficult. I prefer an oil finish. It's easier. For me, it takes longer, but you know, in the end, it is an oil finish, so anybody can redo it with tung oil that you can get from the hardware store. So you know, that really kind of fancies me. I do want to bring attention to these white spacers. If you guys are going to use white spacers, there's a couple things that you have to do. When you sand these spacers turn colors immediately. They're going to turn red if you use this color wood, because the wood gets in there and turns it red. And if you're sanding metal right up against it, it's going to turn gray and kind of dingy colored. Don't let that scare you. Right at the end, right before you go to finish, you take a 500 grit or whatever highest grit paper that you use to finish your handle, and you're going to sand this direction so that you're only sanding the white liner and you're not dragging any other colors into it. And you can very quickly get it to pop white again. The pen is much harder because you can't just sand this direction on the pen, because it's a circle. So you have to just very lightly come over it like that, tap your paper out, come over it like that, tap your paper out several times until you get all the debris off the pen. And then you can come in with an acetone rag, just a little tiny bit of acetone, and clean everything up and wipe any extra residual dust off before you do your oil. So on this one, I'm going to use first I'm going to use the teak oil, which is basically tung oil that's thinned down with naphtha. And what that does is it allows the tung oil to penetrate deeper into the wood pores. Now this is stabilized, but I found out with this curly koa wood, even when you stabilize it with the vacuum chamber, with these pores and stuff, it's good to use something like this teak oil that can get deep into the pores. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this tung oil on this side and let you see that grain pop, and then I'm going to flip it over and put the tung oil on the other side. And then so basically here's what I'm going to do. Tonight I'm going to put a layer of the teak oil on here and let you see the grain. I'm going to flip it over, do the same thing so you can see the grain. That'll give you a pretty good idea what this is going to look like. And then I'm going to spare you guys the next 3 days of me putting oil coats on here. The process will be, I'll switch over to tung oil tomorrow, and I'll do a coat in the morning and a coat in the evening. Maybe a coat in the morning, coat in the afternoon, coat in the evening. And then the next morning I'll come out and I'll sand it back so that all that's left is the oil and all these little pores, and all the oil on the top will be gone. And then I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. I'll do 3 coats tomorrow, and then, I'll do that 3 days in a row. And then the final time I'll sand it back, I'll make sure that I've raised all the pores all the way up to the top surface, and then I'll go ahead and lay on a couple of finished coats of tung oil. Teak oil, here we go. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I had a lot of fun making this dagger build. We did the QMI for it, and then I went ahead and made the handle up for you in this video right here. The question that I have for you is, would you like me to make a sheath for you? Would you like to see a dagger sheath video? If you would, leave a comment down below and let me know what kind of sheath you'd like to see, maybe different materials in a sheath or different designs of a sheath, and I'll take all that into consideration before I make my next video. Thanks for sticking around, guys, and I'm going to put a link, actually it'll be up here. I'm starting to figure this stuff out. I'm going to put a link up here to another video that you guys might enjoy watching.